Once you marked that songbook, I was really glad. I was anxious to see Daniel here this morning because he requested this months ago. Now, I do reserve the right to do another lesson. I have learned a lot about deer, and quite frankly, this lesson does not follow the whitetail as closely as I would like for it to follow the whitetail. What I did in this lesson is I wanted us to look at various passages in the Bible that refer to deer. And I'll mention this later on, but the deer in the Bible are a cousin of the whitetails called the roebuck. And so the application, the habits, the lifestyle of the roebuck and the whitetail are very similar. And so if we're looking at a created creature and lessons from the habits of these animals, we can see a lot of applications from the Bible in the whitetail deer. So again, I reserve the right to expand and go a little bit further into the culture and nature of the whitetail than I did in the lesson. But nevertheless, the Apostle Paul reminds us in Romans chapter 1, as I always like to begin my little created creatures lessons in, reminding us that the Apostle Paul says that we can know God in two ways. There are two avenues in which we learn about God. The first and most obvious is the Bible. We learn about God and His will for us in the Bible, but the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 1 and in verse 20 reminds us, as he says, for His, being God's, invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, in the things that have been made, so that they are without excuse. Mankind is without excuse, for the evidence of God is clear all around us, is basically what the Apostle Paul is saying. The evidence of God and His magnificent power can be seen through the things that He has created. And so it is important for us to continue to study God's creation, making application to the Word of God in order to learn more about God. And so the whitetail deer is the largest and most common and the most sought after deer in North America. Now, something I didn't realize is, technically speaking, the whitetail deer is not only just native to North America, but they stretch clear down into Central and South America as well. Although some people are beginning to divide them into subcategories, they are still considered to be part of the same species, even though the further south you go, as a result of the higher temperatures, the smaller the deer, the smaller the rack. Hence, we live in the perfect place. Okay? So, these deer are sought after as food. I seek them because they're a plumb nuisance. All I want, if it's brown, I want it down. But, Daniel, on the other hand, is probably in the category of those who seek these things as a trophy. I know Brock is. I've seen pictures of his walls. How in the world Haley ever cleans all those deer heads, I will never know. But nevertheless, they are probably the most sought after animal by sportsmen in this region of the country than any other wild animal in existence here. So I find it to be interesting. Their native ranges from the East Coast clear to the Rockies, and so they've got a wide range there from up into Canada, clear down into, as I said, down below Mexico, South and Central America. But again, we live in the perfect place, or close to it, for these beautiful creatures. So probably the best known and named for is the tail, which is what you see when you're Brock and you miss your trophy. And it waves goodbye. Now, something I didn't know, and I don't know, maybe you guys can tell me if this is true. The guys I work with, they claim that the bucks don't wave the flag. The buck will tuck his tail between his legs when he's running. I don't know if it's true. But the guys I work with claim that, yeah, you can always tell a buck when he's out in the field with a bunch of does, their tails are up, and the buck's tail is always down. I don't know. I'll let you guys tell me that later. But the main thing, what do we actually learn? What's the biblical lesson from the deer? Now, I love this picture. Kate found this picture online. Love that thing. You know, baby deer have no smell. The Lord has provided them with an being sent free as babies in order to protect them. So I think we could take a lesson that the Lord loves babies. And He even protects the baby deer. Their number one in this area, in this region, their number one enemy is the coyote. Coyotes love hogs at this stage in life. But again, you don't have to be a Bible scholar to find deer in the Bible. As I mentioned earlier, there's two words they usually go under in the King James Version. Roe, and I'm trying to think of the other one off the top of my head. I'll pull it out later. But the roe deer are cousins to the whitetail. The principles in the Bible really, quite frankly, apply to both. The Bible has, I found, at least 45 passages, not just verses, but passages where God uses the deer to convey a message, or it's referenced in a specific way that makes an application. 45. And this may actually be one of the top animals listed in the Bible, outside of course, sheep, cattle, and stuff like that. But this is probably, quite possibly, the number one or number two listed wild animal, undomesticated animal listed in the Bible. Had no clue. So, deer in the Bible are depicted as, first and foremost, if you look at these passages, deer depicts strength and integrity. Okay? Number two, the deer are depicted as a stability. And thirdly, the deer depicts seeking. Now, there's one I left out, and it may fall between the last and next to the last. Deer are depicted in a way in which conveys love and dedication. We'll get into that. So the next time you see a deer or think about a deer, as I know some of you do all the time, just remember there are biblical lessons in the whitetail. Strength and stability. I want to share with you a couple of passages that we've got, but one thing that I did not know was the real range area in which you find the white-tailed deer. And it is a testimony to the ability of the deer to adapt, not only to adapt to an environment, but to thrive. So something I didn't realize, and again, this is mentioned later in the lesson, something I didn't realize, I wish I had a pointer with me today, those antlers that you see on that deer, I knew they grew them every year, right? They lose them, and then they regrow them. What I didn't realize, and I know that you guys know this, but I don't, I didn't realize just how much nutrients and energy it takes to create those horns that everybody wants on their wall. So the deer naturally seek out the most nutritious food possible in order to grow those. I also didn't realize that they are actually quite tender when they're in the velvet stage, and the deer are sensitive on their horns. When I think horns, I think something that's a bone-like thing. So there are things that I did not realize about the whitetail that I've learned and found quite fascinating. Both the Psalm 18, verse 33, Habakkuk, chapter 3, verse 19, 2 Samuel 22:3, all three of these passages, as well as a couple of others not listed here, all of them talk about God making our feet like a deer's feet so that we can be, quote, on high places. Turn back with me to the book of Psalms, chapter 18. And I just want to look at this passage. All the others are almost exact mirror images of what the psalmist writes here in Psalm 18. I want us to think about what God is wanting about this strength and stability and what the plea is that the psalmist is asking God for. Psalm 18 and in verse, I want to begin a little bit maybe before verse 33. Verse 31, for who is God but the Lord? And who is a rock except our God? It's a rhetorical question. God is the solid rock in our lives. The God who equipped me with strength, the psalmist says, and made my way blameless. He made my feet like the feet of a deer and set me secure on the heights. He trains my hands for war so that my arms can bend a bow of bronze. You have given me the shield of your salvation. Your right hand supported me, and your gentleness made me great. I want you to think about that. Now, most Bible scholars that I've read on this, that have commented on this passage, believe the high places to be places of honor. But when I read this, I see the possibility very distinctly that these high places, if God is our rock and we are planted on Him, that we have a great amount of stability like the deer who climb the hills and valleys of our region. Those things, I have seen them leap a 4 to 5 foot fence. It's like God put springs in their legs. And they come down, they don't fall. They come down running. I've seen deer go up and down, almost straight up and down hillsides of rock and not fall. We've got a pretty steep cliff on the back side of our property, but there are deer paths that go up and down that. The deer love to sleep at the top of the ridge. I don't know if it gives them a sense of security to not have anything above them, but they love to sleep at the top of the ridge, at least on our place, the bucks and some of the young does. But nevertheless, God has promised stability, and God gives His followers a stability. I want you to look with me at Proverbs chapter 6. Solomon mentions deer here, and we can draw from the words of the wise man. Proverbs chapter 6 and in verse 5, Solomon says, save yourself like a gazelle. That's a deer, okay? Gazelle is another word that is used in the Hebrew part of the Bible for a deer. Save yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the hand of the fowler. Well, Solomon is reminding us, and he's reminding his son who he's writing to, the importance of saving yourself from your enemies. Particularly, of course, Satan for the Christian. But he's warning. I want you to back up. I want to get the context here. Verse 1. My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor, have given your pledge for a stranger, if you are snared in the words of your mouth, caught in the words of your mouth, then do this, my son. Save yourself, for you have come into the hand of your neighbor. Go, hasten, and plead urgently with your neighbor. Give your eyes no sleep and your eyelids no slumber. Save yourself like the deer from the hand of the hunter and a bird from the hand of the fowler. In other words, get yourself out of your predicaments. Just as a deer, when it senses danger, does not linger, doesn't wait. If he does, he's dead and on a wall. So when you find yourself in a sticky situation, act like a deer. I want to go to 1 Chronicles here for just a moment, chapter 12. 1 Chronicles chapter 12, verse 8. Also talks very similarly, reminding us of how to get out of sticky situations and how seriously we should take these situations. 1 Chronicles chapter 12 and verse 8. From the Gadites, there went over to David the strong, I think I've got this right anyway, the stronghold in the wilderness, mighty and experienced warriors, expert with the shield and spear, whose faces were like the faces of lions, and who were swift as gazelles or deer upon the mountains. It's a reference again about how quickly the deer moves. So when Solomon is talking about getting out of a situation, a bad situation, move quickly. Not linger in a bad situation. Love and devotion. The Song of Solomon. The, if you will, only adult book in the Bible. The Song of Solomon talks about love and devotion. And Solomon uses the deer so many times to depict love and devotion. So let's go there. Let's look at the Song of Solomon, chapter 8, and see what Solomon says. In Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verse 14, Solomon says, Make haste, my beloved. Make haste, my beloved, and be like a deer or a gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spice. This is the woman. This is what sometimes we don't realize is the Song of Solomon was written as a play. It's probably the original musical. Okay? So the Song of Solomon is a play written by Solomon in a very romantic sense. And it ends with the woman. And her part is she's pleading with her beloved to make haste like a deer or a young stag. Again, depicting that speed to come and be with her. There's probably more written online. I didn't realize this. I'm doing my research on the internet about the deer, and what I don't know about deer can write volumes. But I'm doing my research on the deer, and there is more written on the internet regarding the rut than anything else. You know, and I suppose that means some things never change, because that's really what Solomon uses the deer to represent in the Song of Solomon, in this musical play. The Bible capitalizes on this idea. What I didn't realize is that during the rut season, during the mating season, buck deer are not much different than teenage boys. I'm pretty sure a whole lot of parallels could be drawn. You know, they apparently don't eat very much during the rut season and drink very little water. In fact, one writer I read about said if rut season happened in July, the deer would die of exhaustion and overheating. Don't doubt it. And so God created a season in which the deer decide that they need to be in this romantic mindset. Just like a buck deer, a man should always be infatuated with his wife. Always. Our wives, guys, should be the love of our lives. We're in the book of Song of Solomon. Let's back up to closer to the beginning of this play. Chapter 2, and in verse 9, there will be some verses I will give you that I will not read. Chapter 2 and verse 9, again, this is the bride who is likening her husband to a deer. Now, my wife did ask me to remind everybody that sometimes we need to be cautious, guys. Apparently, there are some whitetail widows in the room. That maybe, guys, don't abandon your wives completely during deer season. Remember, they still exist. And if you're a woman who happens to be in love with the whitetail, remember that your man still exists during deer season. But the Song of Solomon, again, this is the wife referring to her husband. My beloved is like a gazelle or a young stag. Behold, he stands behind our wall, gazing through the windows. King James Version says lattice. Looking through the lattice. My beloved speaks to me. Arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away, for behold, the winter is past. Bible romance. Don't think the Bible is devoid of romance. It's not. And young people, be careful. You know, we have hunting season during rut season for a reason. There's a reason that hunting season is during the mating season for the deer, okay? It's when they're the most stupid, vulnerable creatures on the face of the earth. When our young people are at that stage in their lives, it is when they are the stupidest, most vulnerable people that you will ever see. It's beautiful, and yet sometimes you're like, what are they thinking? I remember as a child watching Walt Disney's Bambi. I'm not sure I totally recommend it, but it's fun to watch. And I remember I was the oldest grandchild. My aunts and uncles were not married yet when I was in first grade, second grade, third grade even, I think, before any of them got married. I was the oldest grandchild, and I remember watching my aunts and uncles as they became Twitter-pated, thinking, man, they just became stupid. It's like they had one thing on their mind, just like the deer. Solomon, in giving advice to his son, I think it's applicable to both young men and to young women. I believe that Solomon writes words of caution here in Proverbs chapter 7, verse 21. And I think we would do well to heed those words. with much seductive speech. She persuades him. With her smooth talk, she compels him. Suddenly he's fixed. He's got one thing on his mind. All at once he follows her. As an ox goes to the Molyneux meat process, to the slaughter. Or a stag is caught fast till an arrow from Brock's bow pierces its liver. As a bird rushes into a snare, he does not know that it will cost him his life. In other words, be careful. Pick the person you're going to spend the rest of your life with caution, so that you don't end up with an arrow piercing your liver. Again, love is beautiful. Love is wonderful. But we need to go in to love and marriage with our eyes wide open, fully aware of everything. I won't read these following passages to you. You can look them up later. Proverbs chapter 6 and verse 5. Proverbs chapter 5 and verse 19. They're a little bit over the top for our young people. Now, we sang a song at the beginning of service this morning. I wanted to lead that song since Peter didn't feel comfortable doing that. As the deer pants for the water. That comes from Psalms. Chapter 42. I want to go back there and read that. You'll see that the song we sang is almost word for word what the psalmist used. Psalm 42, verse 1. This was written for the choir master, to be sang in the palace. As the deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. As my soul thirsts for the living God, or for God, for the living God, when shall I come and appear before God? One thing I learned very early on and was taught, if I was ever lost in the woods, and we tramped the woods. A lot of kids these days don't get the chance to tramp in the woods, but I think all the young people here get the opportunity to be in the woods. Something I was always taught from an early age: if you're ever lost in the woods, you can't find your way out, follow a deer trail downhill. It's going to lead you to water. And eventually that will lead you out. As a deer pants for the water, deer need water. You know those antlers that everybody's after? When those things are in the velvet stage, they're full of blood. That requires a lot of water in order to maintain those antlers, in order to grow those antlers. Deer don't survive. That's one of the reasons in hot, dry climates, the deer are smaller. Now, I don't know what happened over on your side of the river, Kevin. Those deer over there are, I think it's overpopulation. But, but usually if you go further south and further to the west, where it's a drier climate, the deer are going to be smaller than they are around here. And so the psalmist says that he seeks for God like a deer seeks for water, a thirsty deer. Are we thirsty Christians? Are we seeking God like those deer? Now, Isaiah uses deer in a poem in Isaiah chapter 35, reminding us of the rewards of seeking God in our lives. So I'd like to go back there and read Isaiah chapter 35, as Isaiah is reminding the children of Israel the importance and the rewards of seeking God. Isaiah 35 and in verse 4. Say to those who have an anxious heart, be strong, Fear not. Behold, your God will come with vengeance, with the recompense of God. He will come and save you. Then the eyes of the blind shall be opened, and the ears of the deaf unstopped. This is when people seek God. God is going to be found. Their eyes are going to be opened. Their ears are going to be unstopped. Then the lame man shall leap like a deer, and the tongue of the mute sing for joy. When we seek God, He builds us up. He gives us strength like a deer. He's going to let us leap the obstacles in front of us. Remember I said they had springs in their legs? Solomon says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. And it's true. A fearful respect of God spurs us on to an understanding of who He is. But Malachi chapter 4, the very last book of the Old Covenant, before we get into the book of Matthew and our New Testaments, the book of Malachi chapter 4 and verse 2, well, let's begin in verse 1, get the context to which Malachi is writing. For behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, when all the arrogant and all the evildoers will be stubble. The day that is coming shall set them ablaze as the Lord of hosts, says the Lord of hosts, so that it will leave them neither root nor branch. But God says, for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings. You shall go out leaping like calves from the stall. You shall tread down the wicked, for they will be ash under the soles of your feet in the day when I act, says the Lord of hosts. Now the word there that is translated calves, in the King James, I believe that it refers to deer. It's a deer calf, if I understand the Hebrew correctly. It is a fawn leaping that is depicted in this particular passage. Closing thoughts. As I bring this lesson to a close, I've got a few thoughts for your consideration. I mentioned earlier that deer have a tendency to seek out the most nutritious food, which is what makes them such a nuisance in my life. They just love. I can't even tell you. We've got 161 acres. Where do I find the most deer? Right in my orchard, right in my garden. Well, I guess what I'm doing is providing them the nutrients they need to thrive. Deer are intelligent. How intelligent are we? Do we seek out nutrients in the Word of God? Do we seek out what we need to thrive, spiritually speaking? Are we as intelligent as a deer? You know, a healthy doe will generally give birth to twins, sometimes triplets. I've got 2 does, they have twins every year. Drives me nuts. Why? Well, because they're healthy. See, when we're healthy, spiritually speaking, we tend to thrive. We tend to thrive throughout life. Now, that doesn't mean I want my wife to have triplets. Don't misunderstand. Don't go quoting me as saying that outside the walls of this building. Okay? My wife and I have 10 beautiful children, and I am perfectly happy. I'm waiting on some of the rest of you to catch up. The healthier the buck, the bigger his antlers. The healthier the buck, the stronger he is, the more capable he is of defending his territory. guys, the healthier we are spiritually, the more capable we are of defending our territory against Satan and his invasions. And the more capable we are of protecting our families from things around us. Where are you spiritually? The Bible's full of 42 passages that reference deer. They are an amazing created creature. As I said before, we've only skimmed the surface. But where are we? Would someone look at you today or me today and would they say, there is an amazing Christian? Would they want us as a trophy? Or do we seek God as much as we seek the deer? It's a good question. As the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs after you. If there's anyone here this morning subject to the invitation, won't you let us know as we turn in our